Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Just getting ready for the Outsiders and First Dog on the Moon, a week out from the election.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
And joining me this morning to make head or tail of it, Alexandra Lee, fresh from the Chaser election desk, Paula Mathewson, one-time operative, now columnist at the Drum and New Daily, Roger Franklin, editor of Quadrant Online. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Brexit, eh? Who tipped that? Alexandra, was that you saw that coming?
No, not at all. I to be honest, I wasn't paying too much attention to it before it all started to look like it was going to become a reality, and then suddenly
There it was.
Larger
than life. Roger, I'm sure you were paying attention.
I was watching the polls and wondering if they were accurate, and not for the first time in recent memory, we found out the pollsters wouldn't know if their posteriors were on fire.
That is the thing here, and we live and breathe polls and with appropriate reverence, but as you say, this is an instance where the pundits, the polls, no one picked this.
No, nobody
Basically.
did. Nobody did. And the fascinating thing about it, of course, is if you look at the map of the British Isles, the divide is geographic as much as it is demographic. It's quite stark.
Well, the divide, Paula, is many-fronted, is it not? I mean, it's young and old, it's rich and poor, it's working, it's not working, it's regional, it's city. It's an incredibly divided United Kingdom, Paula, that we have now after the Brexit vote.
It is, and I was listening to the earlier interview you did with Mark and Anne, and discussion around the old and young divide. I think a point that's being missed is about 70% of young people did not vote in that referendum or plebiscite. So it was 30% of the 70% of the 30% that did vote. Voted to stay. So I mean that there are lots of implications for Australia from that vote, but that's one of them. And I think we'll see young people mobilise a bit more in Australia for the federal election.
Alexandra, speaking as our token younger person, what's going on with the youth?
Just in general, yeah. I think with the Brexit, there's a lot of anger from young people, especially online, and so. They're the people who are obviously going to be already fairly engaged in politics, but they really feel like they've been let down by their older generation, and they feel like there are a lot of similarities to kind of the tension between the baby boomers and the young people in Australia. But, they feel like that the older generation were given a bit of a leg up in terms of free education and access to pensions and things like that. And then now that they're kind of being taken away from them, and now they're not letting them have all this freedom to work in 27 other countries and travel around, and they feel like they've made a decision on their behalf. And so you can understand why they feel anger at that generation, but I hope that it moves beyond that, because it's obviously not that simple. It's not like all the grandparents of Britain have united to, screw over the young people. Like, it isn't actually that. Obviously, there's a lot of disenchantment in a lot of the rural areas and things like that, where people feel like they have been let down by the austerity measures. And
that disenchantment, Roger, I mean, that's the thing which has been hugely underestimated here, the way in which people are just not having a bar of it.
What, Brexit or...
Well, I think Brexit is a really clear example of it, but it's broader than Brexit. I mean, if you look at Trump in the United States...
It's universal.
I think that's the thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. I'll be in the States for the November election, and I've always enjoyed American elections, but this is going to be fantastic. Because what you're going to find, as the Republican establishment found, is that they don't control the masses. They simply don't. And I fully expect Trump to win. Genuinely expect him to win. I know that's against the conventional wisdom as filtered by foreign correspondents in the US. But if you've lived there, as I have, for 25 years at a stretch, if your son's an American, if you hear the disenchantment from people, for example, a certain person I know, with whom I was once intimately connected, was quite happy, in fact proud to vote for Obama. Last time I spoke to her, she said she's voting for Trump. Why? Because she reckons there's a China shop, It's badly managed, and someone needs to let a bull in, and that's her entire philosophy.
I wonder, Paula, if there's an element of that in our politics too. I mean, both sides are sort of saying Brexit, let's be stable, look for a safe pair of hands. But is there a counter argument to that just says, oh, enough of both of you? I mean, are we seeing that in our politics?
I don't think we necessarily are at this point. I mean, sure, there is a growth in the vote for the Greens and independents, minor parties and the like. But I think the experience that we saw in the Gillard-Rudd years is one that people aren't going to forget quickly. And that's pretty much what both Turnbull and Shorten are depending on. That's why they're both saying there will be no deals. So I know that there are some parallels between the disenchanted in Australia and those other nations, but we don't have the same levels of unemployment or poverty or disconnection that is taking place in those nations. So, I think our disgruntlement is a little bit more self-indulgent and a bit more disconnected.
Because we're doing okay, basically.
Well, yeah, and when people are doing okay, they don't tend to throw out the government.
Now, minor parties in the UK for a while have meant this guy.
The dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom. And we will have done it. We will have done it without having to fight, without a single bullet being fired. We'd have done it by damned hard work on the ground.
Apart from the fairly obnoxious reference to a single bullet being fired, Roger, and of course there were bullets fired in this campaign.
No, there was one fired, and it was fired by a lunatic.
The mad loner theory.
You can't seriously pin him to a Remain forces. I mean, the man was a gibbering idiot with a homemade gun.
You can pin him to the politics of the far right, but that'll be demonstrated in the British courts. Nigel Farage on the other side. Does UKIP have a role here? I mean, this was UKIP's reason for being.
I think they did, and it's quite interesting because if you look at Farage and, say, Hannam in the European Parliament, both of whom were very keen on exiting, they both appear to have different strategies about what this 2-year exit process involves. Now, I think what you're going to find is that Farage is going to get a new burst of life with his supporters in the UK. If there is any sort of temporising, any sort of fudging, any sort of, well, we're leaving but we're not really leaving, there's a 2-year process, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it works out. I expect this to come down to factionalism as most political things do.
And already, Alexandra, we're seeing sort of the carve-up within the Conservative Party, and there's tension there. Presumably Boris will get the nod, but...
Cameron has been remaindered, as you might say.
What do you make of that, Alexandra? Can Boris pull Britain together, I wonder? Is there someone with that sort of charisma?
Well, I mean, we don't have much to kind of go on with what he's capable of, I suppose. I mean, it's a problem with pushing a movement like that with the appeal of an outsider who's, not like all the other ones, and he hasn't really had to push too much fact or policy in his campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how he backs it up. I mean, we know what happened when a charismatic sort of outsider politician came into Australian politics, and it didn't work out so well for Clive Palmer. So maybe they'll be, I'm not sure that they will be, but maybe they'll be looking at us and saying, oh, well, maybe that's not such a great idea. But
well, speaking of us, here's a taste of, our campaign thus far.
Creating a more diversified economy is the key to growth. Our innovation and science program creates the jobs of the future.
When Mum passed away, I remembered how hard she worked for me to have the best education. I want the same for my kids and everyone else's too.
And over 2 million businesses can benefit from our new tax incentives for more growth and jobs.
This election, Labor will have 100 positive policies.
Oh boy, Paula, it makes you proud. I wonder if Brexit is a thing which people voted for, and even then didn't fully understand. But it was a feeling. It was an emotional pitch. And from what we hear there from Turnbull and Shorten, I mean, our politics is much the same. It's based on rhetoric. It's based on an emotional appeal.
Absolutely, we still have a vast majority of the voting populace that does not pay attention. And we have a growing proportion of people, I think it's about 20%, who don't make their minds up until the last day, the day. And when they do, they don't scour the papers and put together an Excel spreadsheet to compare the policies. They vote on their gut instinct. Who do they like? Who do they hate? Who do they trust? Who do they distrust? So they're the sorts of things that they balance up, and so the emotive ads are basically trying to make a connection in those people's minds. So that's the thing that they recall on the day when they try to make their minds up.
Have you been impressed by it, Alexandra? I mean, which leader has the better relationship with their family, do you think, with their parents? I think that's a critical issue.
Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, I think both of the leaders are kind of coasting to the end, unfortunately. I don't really think we're going to see anyone pulling anything amazing out of their hats in the last week. They've already kind of played all those emotional cards, like their family card, and both of them have love their families and want to provide a better future for their grandchildren or children, and it's just, I don't think anyone's really responding very much to it.
And then we head, Roger, to our own plebiscite post-poll. Interesting parallel there with the Conservatives in this country, the Liberal Party here, trying to placate its more conservative wing with the same-sex-marriage plebiscite, which is what Cameron did with the Leave referendum in the UK. It's a sop to his hard right. I'll give you this plebiscite, you'll never win it, but
it also helped winning. It also helped winning the election because it locked them up. It locked that faction up as Cameron supporters and defied the polls, as we were saying before.
And as Paula pointed out before, people are sick of that sort of the turmoil in Australian politics. But I wonder, and given that divide within Conservative politics, that the post-election here will have a narrower Turnbull win. We'll have the potential for civil war in the Liberal Party. We'll have the Labor Party looking for a new leader. We'll have a House of Reps crossbench. We'll have an utterly divided Senate.
And a Senate that will be the dictionary definition of chaos. It's just going to be lovely.
Paula, that's not going to make please just make it, calm and measured people happy, is it, the situation we're likely to get next week?
Well, they'll be wishing that they could sign a petition to have another vote, I think. But
Freak out.
Yeah, that's right. That's what's going to happen. But I don't think that voters are necessarily looking that far ahead. Both the campaigns have been running some very strong scare campaigns and will continue to this week. People are relatively short-sighted. I've read a lot of stuff about Mark Textor saying people vote tactically, and I bow to his greater knowledge on this. But
what does that mean? People voting tactically?
Well,
Okay, we're about on the upload limit, so I'll call a halt to this video.